Alright everyone, welcome along. Tuppence Tuesday. So, last week we kind of looked, didn't we? We went through, we were starting to talk about the toxicity that you can get with your metrics and with your KPIs especially. And KPI development is something I thought we should really carry on and we should pick up and talk about today. So what really goes in, yeah? And if you remember, this was the last slide that we showed, right? It's from Robert Crawford, he's actually a poet, right? He's not from the world of business or BI or anything like that. He's a poet. What gets measured gets done, and what gets recognised gets done again, and even better, okay? Now, I've put the full quote in because kind of what we often get is what gets measured gets done. But I think the important thing is to realise that if it gets recognised, which it's doing by being, well done, you're doing well against your KPI, right, it's going to get done again. And if that behaviour isn't the behaviour you want, it's going to get done again. Even better, right? So you can kind of get into a real nightmare of toxicity where your KPI is showing, we're great, we're awesome, we're the best thing since sliced bread, right? But the point of it, the value out of a KPI is out the window. So how can we avoid that? What are the things that we need to be thinking about? Okay? And it brings back this people, process and tooling. The three key areas that you need to be thinking about. Yeah, your people, your processes and your tooling. Every time. What's the people piece? What's the process piece? What's the tooling? So the people are, of course, who's doing it? Who's going to do it? What are you doing? And they have to be aware and support the KPI, right? If it's not supported by people, right? If it's a top-down edict from management, we're going to do this tomorrow and blah, 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 right? And they didn't support it, forget it, is what I'll say. Your process is kind of like how it, and this is the key word, should be done. Because you will go through, you will evaluate, and you will base a lot of your work on a process in a particular way and how it's executed in a particular fashion. And that's true for manufacturing, that's true for R&D processes, that's true for everything, right? But if that process isn't actually what's done, you've got a problem, yeah? So you kind of need to make sure that your KPI structure is going to support the process. And then it also needs to support the people. If you've put a step in the process that's just impossible for people to follow, then it ain't going to happen, is it, really? And you're then going to struggle to get that piece together. And your KPI might be great, but again, we're at that point where the value of it is actually being thrown out the window. And then lastly, the tooling. So you need to think about the application in particular, or the tool that you're going to use to measure your KPI success. So, and this can be as basic as saying, well, we've got a little spreadsheet that we print out and we tape it to the machine, right? And I've seen things like that. We tape it to the machine and then the person, they write down when they're doing it. Alright. Strangely, you look at those, you go, the value add's kind of strange, right? It isn't there, I'll be honest with you, so be careful. But it's because that, again, was because people haven't understood the whys. So, tooling, it doesn't need to be complicated, but it needs to be in the right place. So if you're going to have a manual process where it's something that someone's got to fill out, make it easy for the person doing the actual work to fill it out, so it's not done by a shift team lead or something like that at the end of the week, when, management want that stupid thing again. Because otherwise you ain't going to get the value for it. Okay? So the right tool in the right place with the right process and the right understanding of people. And it's understanding of people, not the right people, because everyone's the right person. You just have to make sure they understand what it is you're doing. So we get to the point, didn't we, where you've got to define a direction and get everything to work based off that direction definition. And that can kind of come, is that a top-down approach or is it a bottom-up approach for your KPI strategy? And your KPI is always the middle piece. That's like the central piece, isn't it? And then your KPI is supported by KRAs, key result... Why have I put P? KRAs, key result areas, not KRPs. Oh, that's supposed to be an A. KRAs, key result areas, KRP, honestly. And then, as I say, we've got the done, piece. So if you're done, like what people are actually doing doesn't align, you've got a problem. So we need to be thinking through that. So what are we actually talking about when we're looking at this? Yeah, so we've got to get everything aligned. Like the tooling has to be aligned. The people, the process, that's training and support stuff, needs to be aligned to make the KPI that we've defined, either from our top-down or bottom-up approach, hopefully a combination of the two to get everyone, this is the right measure that we need to use. This is what we define as success. Because KPI is about success. How can I measure success? What is success in my business? And remember that. And it might not be what you think it is. And that's also is key. Vital, you remember it, yeah? And again, remember, what gets measured gets done. Okay? So your KPIs, we've touched on it, yeah? It's your success. What's that measurable piece of success that we can show? And ideally within a time frame. So, you might say, every year we aim to sell £1 million worth of headphones. Okay? That could be your KPI for your business. So you've got a couple of things on that, because £1 million worth is going to be broken up into units sold. And potentially if we have 5, 10 different ways or offerings, that's going to be a unit sold measure of different areas. And we're going to have bits where the customer process, in terms of your customer management side, is part of it, as part of the done side. You're also going to have the manufacture process potentially, where you've got some stuff being manufactured off site, then you're bringing it together. It might be a case saying, well, they get manufactured over there, we'll bring them in, we'll buy them in, and then we'll package them, and then we'll ship them on to our customers. So there's going to be some KRAs around manufacture, and that we're talking units sold. We might have some units shipped, units this, units that, return percentages. So we've got a clear path, haven't we? If we've got manufacturing happening, what's the other side of it? Training. Okay. At some point, your KRAs are going to go beyond what you believe is kind of that core pyramid. So we might have that idea of sales that's all built up based around units sold, revenue generated, all those kind of things. You're also going to have areas that are going to relate outside the direct achievement of your KPI. So like your KRA of training, so training delivery of training, people's trained, average pass score, those kind of things are going to be part of your KPI in terms of what's eventually going to go up to become that master KPI. And this is where it becomes a challenge, doesn't it? Because if we start to think of that, is sales of £1 million a valid KPI? So what do you reckon then? Okay, there's a lot more to KPIs than just putting in fancy things. Right? There's a lot of views around, should a KPI be a specific thing like sales of £1 million? Or should a KPI instead be made up of some kind of a calculation based around the success or failure of various KRAs? Now, given that the nature of the £1 million sales target was made up of units sold, so we would involve our sales team, we would no doubt involve the actual shipping and dispatch side of our units with our manufacturing team. So there's two teams involved straight away there, isn't there? And then we're going to talk about, no doubt, the finance teams, because somehow we've got to get that revenue in, make sure it appears in our bank account. And it then becomes a case of saying, those KRAs that we break down and that become constituent parts of that KPI, what should those be? And one of the things for me that I'm really keen on is not showing numbers in KPIs. And why would you not want to show numbers? Right? Because the number often drives bad behaviours, is the thing. And the goal of a good KPI is for people to know this is good, we need to do something, and oh my god, it's terrible. That red, green, amber kind of status is everything of a KPI. It's not about, we're at 81%. If we get below 80%, we've got a problem. Because you're at 81%, by definition, things are good. We don't want people to be starting to panic because we're at 81%. We want people to be aware we're in green. And the time that we've designated as when we need to do something is when it drops below 80%, say. Yeah? So if we're showing that number, we're eliciting that bad behavior about we're nearly at target, we're nearly at, and I need to do something, when we've explicitly called out and said, this is green. Does that make sense? So if it's green and everything's going well, I would hope that you were green at 81%. I would hope you weren't steady state running at 95% with a KPI that was 81%, for example. So it's important that we understand that. And if we go down the route of saying, well, we've got 10 KRAs, each of them has different values as a percentage in terms of have they gone through the target? Like, what's the average score out of 100 for the people who've gone through training? What's their training percentage in terms of their pass mark on your written test you've got, or how close are they to making the target sales each month? Is the sales team, and how many orders shipped on time? What percentage of orders shipped on time? If you get those right, and you decide, well, we're going to take, say, an average of the averages, which is bad. Don't get me wrong, an average of averages is always bad. But that average of the averages might be the right KPI for you to use. Although you could have said, well, we're going to use that our sales is going to be 1 million. And it's one of those where you need to look and think through, well, what are we actually aiming to do here? And the way I always say is, and this is my advice, this is what my experience is from dealing with KPIs, is what exactly happens when your KPI goes to yellow. And that's the key piece. What's the business change that you can make when it goes to yellow? And I'll tell you for why, right? Why do I have it like that? So one of the ones I see a lot is like call center metrics being used for anywhere that there's people answer the phone, right? It's like call handling time, speed to answer, stuff like that, right? Speed to answer. Well, if speed to answer is going up, so it's taking longer for people to answer the phones, and then we're going, people are on hold, they're waiting to get their calls answered 5 minutes. It's not good enough. So what's the fix? The only fix available is going to be, we're going to have to get some more staff in. Is that what we want? Is that something the business is going to, I need worries, let's get more staff in. That's quite a high level conversation that's going to be needed in terms of there's a cost implication to our whole support structure, everything's geared up around number of bodies there. Or are you saying, well, we need to shorten our calls? Okay, so shortening the calls to make more people available to handle calls afterwards is fine, but then you're looking at, well, what business process are they completing that we can cut down without, of course, impacting customer service, because they're supposed to be on the phone to a customer, presumably. We want to shorten that time, but it's not necessarily one that you can say, well, I'm going to throw headcount at it, because headcount comes at a cost. That's where, or we might say, well, do we need to be looking at what other avenues can we look at to enable our customers? Would a chatbot help? Can we do a chatbot interface that's going to allow them to do something online instead of having to speak to somebody as their first port of call? There's lots of subtle nuances that come in, and those all started about from having that, well, we've got the average speed to answer, and you have the average speed to answer because the telephone system you bought in will always have those metrics just available, and that's one of those tooling things that the goal of, say, supporting our £1 million worth of sales isn't really relevant about like that. What's the tool that you are using? But again, being displayed as a top-level KPI, which I've seen an awful lot in terms of that speed to answer or average abandon rate, isn't right. It's a KRA, and it needs to be quite down in the detail, because the only fix for those is it's headcount or it's shortening call times, which if you're trying to sell stuff on the phone is difficult. I know the mindset of, well, that person who's waiting on the call could be that sale of £50,000 worth of headphones, and you're only selling £5 worth of headphones at the time. But then wouldn't the question be, well, why have we got both people ringing the same number, going through the same thing? I'm sure if somebody's buying 50 grand's worth of headphones I would hope we had a sales executive who could field their calls and actually be that bit more personal with that level of customer. So, yeah, do you get it? There's a lot more to it than just, this is our KPI. And that's why I'll often say things like, I love the Gartner mindset, I love the Forrester KPIs, the Gartner KPIs that are suggested, but the key thing is they are suggestions. You need to work out how they fit into your business to really maximize the value add that they bring to you. So anyway, don't forget, like and subscribe down below. Come back Friday, we're going through and doing a lovely bit of work really about what happens 6 months down the line when you've got to look at a report pack and actually expand it. And we're going to go through and do some quite interesting things this week with it. So like, subscribe, head on over to geordieintelligence.co.uk, support the channel, stay safe, and don't forget, take care of yourselves and each other. Ta-da.